Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. My name is Emma Vigland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live, steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Van Gosse, author of the First Reconstruction, Black Politics in America from the Revolution to the Civil War. Meanwhile, Republicans block debate on the bipartisan infrastructure plan, putting the Cinema Portman deal in the balance. Oof. Global COVID infections continue to rise, surging by 70% in a week here in the United States, with South America seeing an increase in deaths. Asian nations, including Indonesia and Bangladesh, are seeing their worst infection rise yet. Tokyo set a new 6-month high in COVID cases one day before the Olympics are set to open. What a disaster. Pelosi has rejected GOP representatives Jim Banks and Jim Jordan, the two Jims as I like to call them, not really, from the January 6th Commission, both who pushed false election fraud claims but agreed to seat 3 other Republicans on the panel. Sad for Jim Jordan specifically. He won't get to grandstand. Biden's Justice Department has declined to seek the death penalty in 7 federal cases, marking a change in approach from Trump's eagerness. Time to enshrine an end to the death penalty in law. In Iran, crippling U.S. sanctions and due to climate change, those factors are driving a severe water shortage and drought. Another reminder of how sanctions can devastate populations. And lastly, documents and messages leaked to the New York Times show Washington lobbyists are reportedly scrambling and scheming to see how they can exert control in the power vacuum in Haiti. That's some sick stuff. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I am back from my brief hiatus yesterday. I believe Sam said on the show I had an eye infection. It's a bit better today. I mean, I don't know if I need to point it out. It's this eye, but it wasn't opening. And then, I did a little bit of a hot compress, went to the doctor. This is how we're opening the show. Paid a copay to be told, just hot compress it more. So apparently it's allergies, but these are the kinds of things that discourage me from going to the doctor, but it shouldn't discourage you. Just that,
I noticed on a stream a few days ago that my eye was swollen. My face was wonky, and I'm not saying I have perfect symmetry, but I could notice it, and
right.
I noticed my cheek had swollen a little bit, and I didn't. This is a weird type of allergy that I was unaware happened until I started staring at my face for hours a day.
Right. Well, I mean, when one eye is closed, it's a little more
that's
obvious.
A bit of an indication.
Yeah, and it was painful, and I ended up just compressing it a lot, and it's a lot better today, thankfully. But I'm wearing glasses to shield you all from it. I also think it might have had to do with the amount of haze that we've been seeing in New York City, Matt, and a lot of that has to do with the effects of climate change and what we're seeing in terms of the just pollution and what we're seeing nationally. We'll of course be talking a bit more about that, but let's turn to Joe Biden. Joe Biden did a town hall with CNN last night, trying to sell the infrastructure package on a national stage. It was with Don Lemon, so that's a choice. Biden came out in favor of a talking filibuster last night, which is good news because shifting the filibuster to a talking filibuster would eliminate a lot of the problems that we're seeing in terms of Republican obstruction. That is the good news. The bad news is that he continued to echo childlike notions of Republican reasonability, even though he's been alive for quite a while. Usually you're supposed to get wiser as you get older, but not in Biden's case. He's clinging to literal fairy tales about how voting rights legislation will get passed. Let's take a listen to his full answer to Don Lemon last night.
I would go back to that where you have to maintain the floor. You have to stand there and talk and hold the floor. You can't just say,
I understand that. But what difference is that if you hold the floor for, a day or a year, what difference does it make? Here's the thing for me. You talked about people, and this is important for people who look like me. My grandmother would sit around when I was a kid, 5th grade, had a 5th grade education. I learned that she couldn't read when I was doing my homework. She would tell me stories about people asking her to count the number of jelly beans in the jar, or the soap. So why is protecting the filibuster, is that more important than protecting voting rights, especially for people who fought and died for that?
No, it's not. I want to see the United States Congress, the United States Senate, pass S1 and S4, the John Lewis Act, get them to my desk so I can sign them. But here's the deal. What I also want to do, I want to make sure we bring along not just all the Democrats. We bring along Republicans who I know better. They know better than this. And what I don't want to do is get wrapped up right now in the argument whether or not this is all about the filibuster or, look, the American public, you can't stop them from voting. We tried last time. More people voted last time than any time in American history in the middle of the worst pandemic in American history. More people did. And they showed up. They're going to show up again. They're going to do it again. But what I want to do is I'm trying to bring the country together. And I don't want the debate to only be about whether or not we have a filibuster or exceptions to the filibuster or going back to the way the filibuster had to be used before.
But isn't that the only way you're going to get it done right now?
No, I don't believe that. I think we can get it done.
If you
Based on what evidence? Based on what evidence do you think that you're going to be able to get it done with Republican votes? Because, as I said at the beginning of the show, they are, despite long negotiations about this bipartisan infrastructure package, which most of the money comes from unused money anyway, they're already blocking debate on that, and that hangs in the balance, let alone a voting rights bill that would curb these statewide efforts to suppress the vote and make them more successful electorally, because one party chooses to, through means that are completely unethical and cruel and racist, to make sure that they win elections. And the other party's like, I don't know if I'm that interested in that, which is why Joe Biden is the president and why Biden is the leader of that party. I mean, like, the idea that Republicans know better and that he thinks he can bring Republicans along, he has no evidence for that. And then when Don Lemon basically talks, well, that's the conversation it's about the filibuster. You have to make that the conversation. Biden's like, I don't think we do. On what planet? On what planet?
This was a collaborationist statement from Joe Biden. He's collaborating with the Republicans in the statement of people will vote. What a Democrat is telling you when they say, well, people are going to vote anyway, is that we don't care if the shape of the electorate gets shaped in, say, more upwardly mobile, higher income directions, which is what voting restrictions do. They hurt people of lower incomes. That's why Republicans love to do it, and that's why Democrats apparently are ambivalent about it as long as they get enough people to turn out from the suburbs.
Well, that's true. But of course it's short-sighted in the way that they're looking at it, because much like their courting of these suburban voters is short-sighted. They are interested in short-term success for themselves, but in the long term, they have to build a working-class coalition. They cannot continue to skate along on anti-Trump resentment from upper class to upper middle class suburbanites. But they care mostly about the amount of money that's coming into their coffers from those specific donors. Eventually, people are going to get less outrage and they're going to turn to alternatives. They're not going to have a hold of the professional managerial class, to use an overused phrase, forever, unless they broaden their coalition. So a lot of what it is arrogance. You're right. So I am encouraged by the talking filibuster element, but mostly discouraged by the rest of that answer, because once again, you can't defeat your opponent. One, if you don't consider them your opponent. It's like the Steelers and the Packers playing, and the Steelers are like, I kind of like a lot of these Packers players. I kind of think they're not trying to actually hit me.
Yeah. Get it done.
We're buddies.
Else is malarkey.
Yeah. You have to identify your opponent so you can defeat your opponent. And Biden doesn't even see them as an opponent. So, wakey, wakey. At least he's on board with, all right, we won't fully eliminate the filibuster. But he can't make that a reality if he doesn't first understand what he's up against.
But it's like, I would, if the talking filibuster, I could make that decision, I would say, yeah, do it. But it's like, this is only in service of, passing things like the PRO Act, or which, I mean, we could get some of the reconciliation, but like, or these voting rights stuff, like, just have to do it. And Lemon's point of like, is this process stuff more important? And he goes into all this stuff about how he believes in the process. It's like, nobody else does, Joe. Yeah, nobody does, but I'm going to yes and you again, except for the people that he surrounds himself with, and that very much colors his perspective on leadership, just given how long he's been in Washington for that long. It's very discouraging, but again, if we're trying to look towards a path forward with the filibuster, he seems to be signaling that at least there's a conversation to be had about a talking filibuster, and maybe they think they can move Manchin on that. Maybe that's what Klobuchar was signaling the other day. So we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Van Gosse, and we have a great discussion ahead of us. All right, I'd like to welcome to the program Van Gosse, professor of history at Franklin and Marshall College and author of The First Reconstruction, Black Politics in America, From the Revolution to the Civil War. Van, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Oh, thank you.
So your book, it logs Black political action and organization in the pre-Civil War days in this country. And so much of our learned history in the United States just excludes Black participation in the political process, even after the Civil War, but particularly in the pre-Civil War era. So give us a broad sense of the political organization that achieved abolition in pockets of this country in the pre-Civil War era that largely gets looked over. And we can just start there. What is the First Reconstruction?
Well, it's a deliberately provocative title, because Reconstruction, as properly named, is the policy of the U.S. government from 1863 to 1877 to reconstruct the rebel states and bring them back into the Union. And at the center of that process is what will the 4 million formerly enslaved people do, and what will the government do for them, with them, against them? So that's how we understand Reconstruction. But I am one of various historians, I'm not the only one, who said, well, Reconstruction comes after emancipation. That is actually the process, emancipation and Reconstruction. There was emancipation already in the United States, starting during the Revolution. Multiple forms of emancipation. The British Army emancipated, if memory serves, about 30,000, by far the biggest. Multiple states considered, legislated, or by judicial action emancipated significant numbers of enslaved people of African descent during and immediately after the Revolution, and then actually extending to the 19th century. New York State, which had a very significant enslaved population, only finished emancipation in 1827. So the premise of my book is, if there was emancipation, there was also Reconstruction. Those people didn't disappear. They didn't get on boats and allow some whites to send them back to Africa. They merged into the larger society, which was always multiracial. So I'm saying, emancipation and Reconstruction begin much earlier. And we need to pay attention to those processes as in fact continuous, not as a something back during the revolution and then radical Reconstruction in 1866, say. It's a continuous process from the 1770s really on. So that's why I call the book The First Reconstruction, is to say, if you want, there's a kind of a rehearsal for Reconstruction in places from Maine to New Jersey to Ohio. And it takes extremely different forms, all of which kind of anticipates what's going to happen during and after radical Reconstruction in the 1860s and 70s. In some places, it's quite radical in parts of the North from the 1780s on. In other places, it effectively creates a Jim Crow states in parts of the North, especially the Midwest. So I think that's a good way of jumping into the book.
Absolutely. And, I'm just curious about your thoughts about what accounts for the erasure of these kinds of political movements. Is it because it's purely not on a federal level? Or is it also because it doesn't center white people in the way that I think a lot of our Civil War history chooses to do?
No, well, certainly, you just said it. I mean, so much of the history of this period, from the Revolution to the Civil War, it focused in my upbringing entirely on white people. I didn't even know, as a young man deeply interested in history, a boy, a teenager, I didn't know there were any free people of color in the North. It was never taught in any way, shape, or form. So that's been a long process of rediscovering. Black historians and indeed African Americans always knew about this history. They knew about it, but they were ignored by historians. So there's been a process of rediscovering the history of the free people of color, the formerly enslaved people, and some who had never been enslaved in the northern states, for reasons that are in some ways hard to fathom. Getting at their political activism has come at the very end. So when I started writing this book about 2004, and it was almost by accident, this is not the book I thought I was going to write, because I didn't know anything about this either. I just had a few trace references here and there. And it got bigger and bigger. I realized there was more and more, and then I needed to tell that story. But there's a second point to this, besides the centering of white people and the exclusion of anyone else. I think that across the political spectrum, interestingly, including quite far on the left, which is where I am, there is a shibboleth about the nature of electoral democracy or just electoral politics in the US. So I'm going to state what it is. And I could easily go and look in, I don't know, The Nation magazine or The Progressive or In These Times or some other, and find some good, decent, well-educated progressive person saying, watch my lips. At the founding of the United States, only propertied white men voted. That is, for all I know, that could be in some AP exam, which would be really bad. No part of that statement is accurate. Only propertied white men voted. None of it that's accurate. There were places in the early United States where only propertied white men voted. So let's start. Only men. Nope. Women voted in New Jersey. Black women voted even in New Jersey from 1776 to 1807. And this was not some kind of accident. They knew what they were doing. It was discussed. Parties actually tried to get the women's vote. And on occasion, there would be some charge that, two, I'm going to use the language of the time, I hope nobody is offended, two colored women, decided a state Senate election. So first, the idea that women, think about this, that it was perfectly natural that only men voted. Well, not in New Jersey, which was by no means the smallest of the original colonies and states. They knew what they were doing. There, you had to be an independent woman, meaning a woman who owned some property, was not married, was widowed, and there were plenty of them. So that we deal with that. then the property thing. No, in at least 5 states, and at least 5, including Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, you had, from the end of the revolution on, effectively taxpayer suffrage. Taxpayer suffrage is not the same at all as a property requirement. And my hero, if you want, one of my heroes, Thaddeus Stevens, the greatest revolutionary in American history. Yes, I said that. The hard man of Reconstruction. Thaddeus Stevens, when they were debating suffrage in 1837 in the Pennsylvania Constitutional Convention, said, everybody here knows that any man who can scrape together $0.25 can vote in this state. So it was a extremely minimal poll tax that it basically excluded paupers, which is a category they used to care about a lot. They didn't want paupers voting. That's 5 states at the founding. And then we get to my history. In 10 of the original 13, there was no racial bar to suffrage. 10 of the 13. Only 3 of the big southern states with big enslaved populations put white into their suffrage requirements. How do we know this? When the Dred Scott decision was announced, the most horrific judicial decision in American history, everyone who paid attention knew that this was really bad law. When Justice Taney, Chief Justice Taney, that's how you pronounce his name, said that Africans had never been, never could be, were never recognized as citizens of the United States. He stated this as a fact. This was extraordinarily bad law. And Justice Curtis, in his dissent, pointed out, and Justice Curtis, you know, he didn't have access to the web the way we do. He said what he knew. He said in his dissent that in 5 of the 13, he was incorrect, it was 10. In 5 of the 13, men of African descent had voted freely alongside white men. Guess who quoted Justice Curtis's dissent within weeks at a speech in Illinois? Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
So if Abraham Lincoln, as any well-trained lawyer, knew this, that black men had been voting at the founding, and Lincoln's point was, and I use this quote in the book, it wasn't just that they were voting, they voted to ratify the Constitution. Well, there is no more weighty vote in the history of this country than to vote in the ratification elections of the Constitution. So you notice, only propertied white men could vote. If you get that wrong, if you think that there were, you know, all of these bars, no women, no black men, no men of color, no men without property. If you start from that assumption, it's pretty easy to leave out black voting because it's just part of everybody else that's left out, except it's just not accurate.
Well, I mean, it is, I think, part and parcel of an erasure that we're talking about here. And that what your book does is, I think, really accurately and fascinatingly kind of recapture that by looking at this era in the 19th century, more specifically of these different pockets in the United States that had this burgeoning section of political activism. I guess let's start with New England, because maybe chronologically that makes the most sense.
Yes.
You call it the non-racial Yankee Republic in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, other states, Maine,
Vermont.
Vermont as well. So talk about the history there, the beginning of the First Reconstruction.
So I've, you know, historians, at least the kind of historian I am, we have a lot of leeway to sort of say, we're going to shape this history because we're telling a story. Otherwise, it's just an infinite, literally infinite number of facts that pile up. And that's boring, at least it is to me. So I basically said, you know what, let's divide New England. Upper New England, lower New England. Upper is Massachusetts and points north, keeping in mind that Maine was part of Massachusetts until 1820. This is one of the most, and it's really important for me to stress this. Nowadays, those states, once you get above Massachusetts, those states collectively have, last time I looked, 5 members of Congress. 5 out of 435. They're tiny little states. They're quaint, you know? It's where Bernie's from, and lobsters. This was not the case after the Revolution. Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine were boom states, filling up with people, with 9, actually, at one point, I use, I think, 1820 as a measuring point, 9 times as many members of Congress, something like that. So they really counted. Those states emancipated totally, not gradually. New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey's the worst. New Jersey, it's so gradual, it's a little hard to tell that slavery ever disappears until after the Civil War. Very gradual, apprentice programs. In Massachusetts and points north, it wasn't gradual, it was by judicial decision that simply slavery could no longer exist. And these were in judicial cases brought by Black people. They went to court to say, this man came over and beat me up and tried to drag me back to his house. I'm filing a case for assault. That's Mum Bet, the Elizabeth Freeman case. These were very famous. There's nothing obscure about them. So they had a more radical emancipation. And in tandem with that, non-racial suffrage and Black men entering very quickly into politics. So by the late 1780s, prominent Massachusetts figures are saying, oh, there, look at Prince Hall. Prince Hall, founder of the Black Masonic Lodge, a very famous man in his day. Look at Prince Hall leading his men to the polls. He votes. So there in that upper New England, there is never any attempt to disfranchise. It is not on the table. Both parties compete for votes very actively, though the Federalists, for lots of reasons that are, if too detailed, read the book if you want. The Federalists generally get the Black votes, in part because the Federalists are what used to be called the Saltwater Party, the party of trade and international commerce, and an extremely high percentage of Black men in New England are sailors or otherwise involved in maritime. They work on the docks. They have a distinct labor orientation. So they have a class interest in if allying with wealthy Federalists. They work with them. So that's upper New England, where Black voting comes in extremely early, is very public. Their votes are contested, and they just keep mostly, essentially, in places like Portland, Salem, Newburyport, Boston. They just keep going up, getting more and more influence until they kind of plateau in the 1850s. And some patronage positions, I'll wrap this up so you can see. For me, are they getting offices in the parties? I don't mean high-level office. Are they going to ward committees? Are they being listed in the newspapers as part of the poll workers? And are they getting patronage? And some people maybe think this is irrelevant. No, it's not, actually. If you're excluded from the patronage, then you're disrespected, and it means you don't have much influence. Conversely, if you get some patronage, it means that your influence is respected. And I am able to demonstrate that across upper New England, they get some patronage, they get some party offices, and in some cases, in the more radical third parties, they get a lot of party offices in the Liberty and Free Soil parties. Well, so that's upper. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you detail basically a judicial fight which pushed a lot of this forward, but there was also a rich history of Black electoralism in these regions as well. Talk a little bit more about those coalitions formed, whether it be with the Wigs later on, and eventually, of course, settling on the Republican Party more nationally. But just how that came to be, and how those organizations formed.
Well, I have a theory, okay, especially about New England. Some of it's based in just a lot of evidence, but it's also a thesis. In New England, especially throughout the North, but especially in New England, there is what my friend and a great scholar, David Waldstreicher, calls sectional nationalism. There is a New England nationalism, which is deeply and frankly anti-Southern. And this goes back to the 1790s and the frankly quite justified perception that the Southerners had thrown their weight around, first at the Constitutional Convention and then in Congress, to get what they wanted, and to push national policy in their own interests. And once, of course, Jefferson wins in 1800, beating a Massachusetts man, John Adams, and then you have 24 straight years of Virginia presidents, sectional nationalism takes off. New England nationalism, anti-Southern, is almost perforce anti-slavery. And this can be a very practical look at, contempt for them. They call themselves small r Republicans, but they own human beings. They're a bunch of hypocrites. Right. Or it can be more actually ideologically motivated. It's very hard to sort out the self-interest, the Schadenfreude, if you want, Schadenfreude, and the actual ideological conviction. So what that means is there's plenty of votes in New England, whether in 1800 or in 1860, there are plenty of votes in opposing slavery and opposing the South. Who's going to get those votes? That's the question. Here's my thesis. I think there's what I would call a demonstration effect. If Black men, and voting is extremely public, you can see what color paper someone is putting into the ballot box. You can see which ballot they took from which party worker. If Black men vote for the Whigs in the 1830s and 40s, it's a signal that in New England, the Whigs are anti-slavery. If Black men turn away from the Whigs and vote for the Liberty Party, which is a radical anti-slavery party, it's a different signal. So Black men, even quite small numbers of them, are fought over. Who is the signal being sent to? The much larger number of white men who are trying to decide whether to vote for a major party that is running slave owners, slave holders for president, but is a major party, or to vote for a third party, throw away their vote, so to speak. I hope the logic of this is making sense. So when they see, if a Black man says, I'm voting, I'm a true Whig, I'm sticking with the Whigs because this is my party, and I have a great deal of evidence showing this. This sends a message to white men, it's okay to vote for the Whigs, because at least in the North, the Whigs are good anti-slavery men. Conversely, if Black men switch over to the Free Soilers in 1848, then that's a message of, okay, we can switch too. So that is what elevates the importance of the Black vote, besides the fact that in these port towns, Portland, New Bedford's my best example. There are enough of them to really count. New Bedford is a whole chapter in the book. I refer to it, as many people did at the time, as the apex of Black power. They called it the Gibraltar of, and then these were Democrats, then they used a really ugly word that I'm not going to quote. So the Gibraltar, the great fortress, there were hundreds and hundreds of Black men actively voting in New Bedford. And they put it right out there. They questioned candidates. They ran their own slates. They told their voters how to vote. It was very, very clear they were throwing their weight around. Wait, let me just fill in the background so you understand. New Bedford in this period, 1830s, 40s, 50s, is the richest place in America. It is fabulously rich because of the whaling trade. And Black men are deeply involved in that trade at every level on the ships. Some of them are officers. So they are economically empowered, they are politically empowered, and their vote, shifting their vote from the Whigs to the Liberty Party or to the Free Soil Party, it actually, in some ways, almost reverberates nationally. People know about this across the country.
Wow. Yeah, and I want to move, because there's so many other sections in your book, to Pennsylvania, which is another place in which there were Black people who achieved a significant amount of power, and it had a bit of a different effect, right? Because it, at least in Philadelphia, resulted in the formation of a Black elite, which ran counter in some instances, as you write, to the interests of the larger Black population in that area. So talk a bit about that, because that's another fascinating wrinkle to our history here.
Yes. Philadelphia is in many ways the center of free Black life in the North. It is the largest community and the wealthiest. It is, in 1828, a very prominent Black minister and newspaper editor, Samuel Cornish, who had come from Philadelphia to New York to publish the first Black newspaper, Freedom's Journal. He wrote this article that I cite, lots of people have cited it actually. He says, well, this is the elite of our people. Look at their churches. These are really elegant churches. But then he also goes on to say, and they love politics. They love it. They love politicking with each other inside their churches. So the Philadelphia elite, who were nationally and even internationally famous, James Forten, the gentleman of color, who was a very prominent sailmaker and merchant, was known on both sides of the Atlantic and socialized with, the Philadelphia elite are very, very wealthy, rich people at the center of a huge transnational merchant trade. So they're very connected, James Forten, for instance, or Bishop Richard Allen. But for complicated reasons, they choose not to vote. They don't vote, and they don't mobilize their voters. So this huge, prosperous, free Black community consciously abstains from voting for decades in Philadelphia. And I trace that history. There are good reasons for it. They are on the border of slave states, Delaware and Maryland. They urgently need like a really high level of protection. And the evidence strongly suggests that their white allies, basically, to put it, pretty much the entire leadership of the Philadelphia bar at a time when the bar, the lawyers, the bar of Philadelphia was the most important in the country. The evidence strongly suggests that they said, we'll protect you. We'll make sure that the state legislature doesn't require you to carry certificates. The acts against kidnapping, because there are a lot of kidnappers coming into Philadelphia, but don't vote. If you vote, there's going to be a lot of trouble. Don't vote. And they go along with that for decades. So that's Philadelphia. And this has been studied by other people. This is what happened. They chose not to vote. They were not chased from the polls by violence. They chose not to. They accepted being left off the tax rolls, which function as the voter registration rolls. What I was able to find out, investigate, and I'm obviously somewhat proud of this, is that Black men were voting across the rest of Pennsylvania, where the majority of African Americans lived. The majority of African Americans in Pennsylvania didn't live in Philadelphia. They lived in counties all around Pennsylvania, like the ones that I grew up in, like Bucks County, Lancaster County, Washington County, Allegheny County, big ones. They voted in those counties for 40 or 50 years until disenfranchisement in 1837-38. And there's a very rich history in some of these big, prosperous counties of Black men being organized groups of voters, just as in New England. But then they are disfranchised. That's the difference in Pennsylvania.
And it got to that point, how did was there a bit of a backlash or some sort of coalescing that made things harder for Black people? Of course, it's on a state-by-state basis, but in terms of voter intimidation and segregation to extreme extents, of course, it was, I'm sure, would imagine, always fairly segregated. I mean, what was the bit of the backlash that many of these...
Why disfranchisement? Is that what you're at?
Yes, and that too. In Pennsylvania.
I believe in general, there's lots of disfranchisement, and this is what most historians, they would put in the textbooks, they would say, basically there would be a paragraph saying, across the North, Black men were disfranchised, which begs the question of, but they were voting before that.
Right.
It's like, what about when they were voting? I might be setting up a straw man or tilting at a windmill here. I think there has been an implicit a presumption that this disfranchisement was a kind of natural form of erasure, to use your word, that it just kind of came on naturally and that it came out of racism. It's just, they got around to noticing Black men. Well, of course they disfranchised them. I don't think that's actually accurate, because there was plenty of racism all along, and yet they kept voting. Disfranchisement in Pennsylvania, in states like New York, where it took place, was a product of intense partisan conflict. In the mid-1830s, a coalition of Wigs and anti-Masons, the anti-Masonic party. I'm not going to get into that. And very important party, kind of populistic, anti-elite party that Thaddeus Stevens was a leader of, finally really has a chance to take over the state against the traditional Democrats, the Jeffersonian Republicans turned Jackson Democrats. And you get into the state is shifting back and forth. The Whigs and anti-Masons, especially the anti-Masons in Pennsylvania, were extremely anti-slavery. They were openly. Thaddeus Stevens helped elect the governor, Simon Rittner, who gave his speech in 1835, saying, "We will no longer bow our dark knee to slavery." So in that context, the Democrats are the party of white supremacy for most of their history. The Democrats figured one way they could counterattack was by whipping up sentiment about Black voting. And they found several elections. They set up a target and went after it. This ought to sound very familiar to your listeners.
Right.
This is for partisan reasons. You invent cases. And they managed to turn, there were a lot of Black men voting in parts of Bucks County, which is the 6th largest county in Pennsylvania then. Yeah. And they've been voting for a long time.
It's also a familiar county to our listeners too.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
So they make a big case of that. There was a prosperous black farmer, a man named William Fogg, up in Luzerne County, way up there, traditionally more anti-slavery. And, you know, some Democratic judges simply barred him from voting, that from what one can tell, he was a property. And, you know, he had every reason to vote. He's probably been voting for years. So he goes to the state Supreme Court. So they picked a fight and managed to make black voting something they could rally white men around. And they got rid of it. So, and that's the story in all of these cases of disfranchisement. It's a way to rally white men for a particular party. So that's Pennsylvania.
Yes. And then you also mentioned New York, where before, you know, we run out of time, I want to talk about New York because of the incredible amount of black influence there. You basically, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but seem to posture that it was the most influential black voting bloc in the country, or something to that effect. There was an incredible story about how spooked Martin Van Buren got about black enfranchisement. Talk a little bit about that. Take us through that history in the early 19th century.
Well, I'll try to do it very briefly.
No, it doesn't need to be brief.
No,
I just want to take time for you.
New York, greater New York City. New York City then was just New York County, Manhattan. The 5 boroughs that are today New York City, meaning all of Eastern Long Island, the counties up the Hudson, and even the northeastern counties of New Jersey, is one of the largest slave operating, enslaved labor using places in the country. Most of the Dutch farmers, whether in Brooklyn or what is today Bergen County, what is today Nassau County, what is today Ulster, all of those counties, at one point or another, this is not my work, this is the work of a terrific historian named Craig Stephen Wilder. Those Dutch farmers, and they're a very powerful ethnic class interest, they either bought or hired enslaved labor for their big farms. So there were lots of black men all over that region. Many of whom claimed freedom during the Revolution when the British came in. And, you know, there's several decades there where the best thing, to put it in kind of, the best thing an enslaved person could see is, you know, a British ship in the harbor, because that means that you have a chance at freedom. And that was true during the War of 1812. So right up through, you know, Washington, when Washington marches into New York finally in 1783, the British general refusing to give him back his property, they watched the British ships leave with thousands of formerly enslaved people. So, but there are thousands left there. And so there's the basis for an extremely active and militant politics, because the British had actually, in many ways, liberated them. A lot of black men had been guerrilla fighters for the British, occupying the blockhouses on the Hudson. So they've got a lot of numbers, and they're fired up. They're not like the Philadelphians. They're not cautious. They're a fired up constituency. They start voting really early, even though there's still 4,000 enslaved people in 1827. Sojourner Truth was born a slave in 1814 up the Hudson. So you've got all these enslaved people, and then all these people who got their freedom or run away and change their name. So it's a very dynamic environment. And by the early 1800s, they are in New York City and in Brooklyn, what is today Brooklyn, a pretty mobilized constituency. They control certain trades, notably chimney sweeping, which is a dirty, dangerous job, and they use small children. It's pretty exploitative. And they are being courted by both parties. And they reach a peak of influence in sort of 1810, 1813, when black men in New York have enough votes to swing the entire city's assembly delegation. This is a complicated story, but it's really something. And if you swing the New York City Assembly delegation, you could control the whole assembly. And if you control the assembly, you're pretty close to controlling the entire patronage pot of New York, 15,000 jobs. The assembly will name every officer in the state. The mayor of New York City will be named by the state legislator. That's 15,000 jobs at a time when the entire federal patronage pool is 3,000. So this is big time politics, and the black vote's really crucial. So once again, what will later be Democrats, Martin Van Buren's bucktail Republicans, which are really the basis for the National Democratic Party in the 1820s, they mobilized to get rid of this big empowered black vote. It's a hard fought. It takes 10 years, 1811, 1821. And they finally succeed in passing a huge, high property requirement for Black men. You couldn't just be well off. You couldn't be a professional. You had to own land, a freehold worth $250. That's a big farm.
Right.
1821. So it was effectively completely disfranchising, but with a little fig leaf. The second part of my chapters on New York, though, which I think I'm building some work that other people did, but I have a lot of, look at the census. By the late 1850s, through a whole variety of maneuvers and techniques, the Black electorate has rebuilt itself, and they are claiming 11,000 votes in New York State. Now, New York State is a huge electorate, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, but it's enough to count. And they have become an organized submachine wing of the Republican Party in the later 1850s. And this has taken 20 years of work and a concentration of leadership unlike anywhere else in the country. This is why Douglas went to New York, went to Rochester, because he wanted to be where the action was. They've got Douglas, Henry Highland Garnett, Samuel Ringgold Ward, and then you could, another 15 or 20 top leaders, all in New York State, all deeply tied into partisan politics. So that's kind of, in some ways, the center of the book. I call it the New York battleground.
And then, that's kind of where the Republican Party seems to coalesce in this area, and the separate parties that had been vying for Black votes and Black liberation from more radical perspectives, right. They kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. I wanted to ask a broader question about our history and what this says about the nature of progress, because so much of this, you see things progress, things regress, they're regional, they take decades, there are different iterations of it that lack success but have good intentions, and then additionally how this progress is completely washed over in our historical context. I think of, this is such a silly example, but it's like the Mississippi burning effect, right? Where now, the FBI was the one who really beat down the KKK.
Yeah.
It's just the white Union soldiers are the ones responsible for Black liberation. How much of that is, what's your take on that, really?
Well, I think over the past, really since Obama's election, I think that I myself have had to reconsider I would not have said that I'm attached to a narrative of progress, but I probably was, naively, and because of my subject position, which is, look at me, right? I think what was done to Obama, the rise of vicious white nationalist politics to block everything, and the inability of the Democratic Party, which he had to do anything about that, and then, of course, Trump. I think American historians should just completely dispense with any notion of progress. And I do not mean, however, I want to be clear, I do not mean that we should substitute for a notion of progress, a liberal notion, a Whig history of getting better all the time, that we should substitute a dystopian, always was just this way. I'm not going with either one of those. I think we just have to accept that American history, whatever that means, the history of the United States has always been a history of intense conflict that is unresolved. Eric Foner called Reconstruction America's unfinished revolution. I think the revolution itself was, to say the least, unfinished. Reconstruction was unfinished, and here we are. And so we have to accept and enter into the constancy, the permanency of this struggle, and that it is, in fact, at the level of cities and states, that we have to be very wary of single national narratives, those mostly obscure realities. We have to get down into the nitty-gritty and down into the weeds. And if we do that, we say, here's this struggle that was successful for a while. And but success always breeds more problems. Any political success, actual political success, the second Reconstruction, civil rights movement of the 50s, 60s, 70s, sure, it ended Jim Crow, formal Jim Crow. For the first time in 1868, the majority of African-American people could vote. And here we are now. That was a success, right? We go from 100 Black elected officials in 1964 to 24,000 now, right? That's a great success, but look where we are. That we can't have any happy tales. So for me, give up on progress, but also do not succumb to the idea that there is no real history, that it's always just existing, the same all the way through. It's not the same all the way through. History is based, there will be change. What kind of change is the question?
Right. Well, wise words, Van Gosse, professor of history at Franklin Marshall College, and your book is called The First Reconstruction, Black Politics in America, from Revolution to the Civil War. Thank you so much, Van, for your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, as Sam might say, quick break, and we will be right back. So I thought that was quite excellent, really fascinating.
I think that view of history is very important. There are a lot of crappy and obviously reactionary motivated critiques of the 1619 Project, but one that Adolf Reed makes, which is that when you call people who were indentured just slaves, you're collapsing a lot of history there, and in a way you obscure the fact that things can regress and actually like gains can be lost, and actually like a giant racial project like white supremacy can really get its steam going in like the middle of it, like after a lot of the time that Gosse was talking about. So I think that type of history is really important. Like William Wells Brown, a lot of people don't know, he's the first African-American writer in fiction, published fiction novelist, wrote Clotel. His father fought in the American Revolutionary War, and then William Wells Brown, when he was, a writer, had to go to Europe because of fugitive slave acts, right? So like this, like history is not linear. There's not a linear progress narrative. There isn't.
Right. Let's before we go talk about Ron DeSantis. So, Ron DeSantis was recently selling on his website "Don't Fauci My Florida" merch, is now imploring people to get the vaccine as the Delta variant spreads like wildfire. Global cases are up around 12%, and less vaccinated states are seeing an alarming rise in cases and deaths. And everywhere's really seeing a rise in cases, but specifically more dangerously in states that have less vaccination. So let's take a listen to what he has to say, because I think he's kind of doing a Mitch McConnell pivot here a bit.
So here's, I think, the most important thing with the data. If you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the chance of you getting seriously ill or dying from COVID is effectively zero. If you look at the people that are being admitted to hospitals, over 95% of them are either not fully vaccinated or not vaccinated at all. And so these vaccines are saving lives. They are reducing mortality. Mortality in nursing homes since we rolled out the vaccines in December is down over 95% due to COVID. Mortality for elderly people since we rolled out the vaccines is down nearly 90%. And so we're proud in Florida that we put seniors first on that because they were the most vulnerable. We have 85% of our seniors that are vaccinated and about 75% of folks over the age of 50. We have no mandate. We've provided information to people, and we've been very honest about any data that comes out. And I can tell you that if you look, you are seeing people that are vaccinated. For whatever reason, some I think can test positive if you're vaccinated, but they don't get seriously ill, except maybe rare instances. There's always one-offs on stuff. But I can tell you in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically the gist of it. He did a complete 180 on vaccines, and it seems like it's a bit of a coordinated effort. We had Mitch McConnell, who came out and essentially said, I don't understand why nobody's getting vaccinated. It's only members of my own party who are telling people it's going to kill you. And now we're seeing Sean Hannity and right-wing media that's all coming out in favor of vaccines, and that's because, say it with me, this new surge is threatening the economy and capital, and we've seen a ton of freakouts about the stock market and collapsing in that area. And that's the only thing that guys like this respond to. But, you know, we're gonna... Did someone want to say something?
And specifically their voting base. And, you know, elections aren't decided by that much. Maybe Ron DeSantis will be okay, but, you know, he's got an election coming up, and it's his voters that are vulnerable right now, not Democratic voters.
Yes, exactly. And also, to that point, though, he is taking a bit of a gamble, because DeSantis, of all of these prospective 2024 candidates who wanted to be Trump light, he's been the most successful at it. And Tucker Carlson, right-wing media, everybody online has so thoroughly gotten their base to believe that vaccines are in some way caving to the liberal media. And again, I'm not trying to make this like a culture war thing, but this is just the reality of what this Republican project is, that maybe him even saying this, being a responsible governor for his state might hurt him in his presidential election.
Yeah, well, Noam from South Dakota is hitting him on it because the Dakotas are a lot more insulated from this stuff. They aren't seeing a rise yet. That's because typically it takes a little bit longer for things to get to North Dakota.
Right. I mean, there are literally people running against Greg Abbott from the right, and I think it's Alan West, because he locked down for a little bit. And so soon enough for this Republican base, DeSantis is going to be too far left on COVID response because he said vaccines work.
Well, so yeah, you hear DeSantis trying to get ahead of that by saying, you know, we did it all voluntarily. Well, it's like, the truth is, guy, that you are in the middle of the pack as far as states go in terms of vaccination rate, and you are at the top of the pack in terms of at-risk populations because of the nature of Florida. Right. So you have a serious problem in the way that, like, again, like I said, like Noam, she has a luxury, because until like Sturgis comes around again and they start up another wave that way, it's kind of quiet out there.
All right, guys, we gotta say goodbye to our Peacock audience. Sayonara. See you tomorrow. And if you are hanging around with us, we've got more to talk about. Yeah, I mean, just reflecting on Van Gosse's contributions to the show there. Like, as you were saying, Matt, narratives that envelop history, even if they're, you know, ostensibly ones that are meant to kind of lionize progress. Lionizing progress in and of itself is not a good thing. Because it obscures the work that it takes. I mean, we see this with Martin Luther King on a daily basis.
English plantation masters in like the Caribbean and the South literally like had this, what was called like the Black Legend against Spanish slavers, that they were so much worse. So like all the guys that were running like cane sugar plantations in the Caribbean thought that they were actually like, oh, we're dealing them a little bit better, even though we're, you know, killing them at like after like 5 years of this work, right? They thought, well, the Spanish were worse. So like these linear progress narratives are harmful because they're basically like apologies for the current status quo. Because if the past was so bad, I think the message that a layman will get, well, it's like, well, this is now I'm not enslaved now, for instance, right? Like,
or I'm a passenger in my own history,
right?
Which is dangerous in and of itself. It's depoliticizing, or it's, you know, it doesn't allow for agency for people in their current lived experience politically. So, all right, folks, we're gonna head into the fun half. Do we have Brandon? Do we have old Matt?
Old Matt should be joining us briefly.
Oh, I
not
see
seen
him.
Brandon yet.
But first, what's happening on Left Reckoning tonight?
So actually, it was last night.
8
Eastern. Wednesday is our new time. Lillian Chichurkia, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, on post-Marxism and why it's wrong, why being post-Marxist is bad. She talked with David Griscom about that, and we also, what else did we do last night? We talked about Bezos and Branson a little bit, and especially in the context of the just awful treatment that Frito-Lay workers are standing up against. So check that out last night. We had a lot of fun in the post game too. We also talked about the posthumous article released by Jacobin, written by Michael, about the war on poverty. And I think David Griscom probably knows Michael's mind as well as anybody on that particular issue, and like going public with it, and just the gross way that like Trump's attack on food stamps was covered by people who never dealt with anything remotely like that. So check that out last night. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the post game.
Hello, Matt Binder.
Hi, Emma. Hi, Matt. How are you guys all doing?
Now we have Brandon. How are you? What's happening on Doom?
Oh, hey, Brandon's here too. Well, tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder. I will be talking with an organizer with No Olympics LA. We'll be discussing all the various problems with the Olympic Games and what they do to their host cities. And specifically, we'll be talking about the specific, I should say, issues with what's going on this year at the Tokyo Games, and then what they're trying to do to stop the upcoming games coming here in a few years. That's tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder.
Awesome. Brandon, what's happening at the discourse? What's up?
Well, I'm in the process of editing our latest episode on COVID-19 and the current, crisis or manufactured crisis, or,
Totally get it.
That's always happening, but specifically in this case, referring to Cuba. And I'm going to be working on that. And so that should be out, soon for our fans and haters alike.
All right. Well, fans and haters, please hit the like button and subscribe. I was just reminded by a dear person in our chat to do that, which I just did. So 646-257-3920. Heading into the fun half now. See you guys there.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. Black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. I'm still eating cashews. It's a regular thing at this point.
I ate before the show this time. I'm proud of myself.
There you go. That's how it's done. That's the professional thing to do.
I eat breakfast at 8:30. Like, I don't know how Sam, for example, gets from breakfast time to the end of the show. It's just I'm for me it's my mood decreases dramatically. I get hangry. So
I think I get tired, but I also forget that it's possible to get tired from being hungry, and so I'm just like, what's wrong with me? Which makes me angry. So I get confused.
Yeah, exactly. That your mind-body connection isn't fully there yet.
See, I'm the opposite, where I'll like drink like a soda and then a Red Bull, and then like maybe even like I'd have like something really sugary, and then be pacing around my apartment being like, why can't I focus on it?
Yeah. Well, the worst is when coffee or whatever caffeinated thing's sloshing around in your stomach. This is actually, I should say, this is just coffee cold brew that I have in here, and it's so good. It's really good.
Not a coffee person. Much prefer my caffeine in the form of a nice cold beverage.
You are a. I see this in your mason jar. Is that soda? What soda is that you prefer?
Right. It's actually a Skull, a cup that somehow I got. I don't remember how.
It's a crystal Skull.
Yeah. It's just just Coke. Yeah, or Pepsi. I don't have a fave. They're both good.
It's not Pepsi this week.
No.
Right. I was raised.
You crossed the picket line.
No,
I was raised as a Pepsi guy, and let me tell you, once you become Coke, you can't go back.
Wait, there's something wrong with Pepsi today or this week?
It's owned by Frito-Lay. So.
Oh, well, good to know. I'm actually drinking Coke. I could go get the bottle if you want.
No, Matt, pretend it was purposeful. And Brandon, how does one get raised in a Pepsi family? I just want to know kind of how that happens.
I really think it's like a Southern thing, like a geographical, like my family's from South Carolina and North Carolina. And so like, I think it's just a more Southernly acceptable drink. I don't know if it's particular to a Black community. So we were a Pepsi household.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because Coke is out of Atlanta, and they just call everything a Coke down there. But the Carolinas are Pepsi because I think Pepsi's from North Carolina.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Now, down where your family's from, is it soda or is it something else? Because I know in like the Midwest, they still call it pop, right?
Yeah, I went to school in the Midwest. It's super weird that they call it that. I don't know. I think it's soda down south where I'm from. I've never heard them call it anything weird. I've seen the geographical, like linguistic map where it's like soda, pop, Coke, and then I don't know what they call it in like, the West Coast.
Yeah, I said pop when I was like 8 and 9, but like so. I can still say, no, I can't really say pop without being self-conscious about it anymore.
Wow.
That's when you know you're fully Brooklynized. I'm going to read just a few IMs and then we'll get some clips if that's okay.
Yeah, actually, before we do that, I just have to ask you a question, Emma. I was expecting an eye patch today. What's going
on?
Well,
I explained at the start of the show for the Peacock audience, which I'm sure they appreciated. My eye was completely swollen shut when I woke up yesterday. It was an extreme sty, which they think is caused by allergies, but I did go to the doctor to pay money to be told that I just need to hot compress, which I did all day yesterday, all night until I went to sleep, and then for like an hour this morning, and it's actually not that bad now, but it was.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I'm disappointed.
The eye patch had to wait. Yeah. But like,
I'm disappointed your eye is fine because I wanted a pirate on the show today. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just like I was pretty dramatic about it, but anyway, so Daniel Jones, apologist, I'll read this first, says, that's me. Emma, what's your most conservative view, whether it's about a guy paying for the first date or chivalry, etc.? I split the bill with my boyfriend all the time. I consider myself a pro-gun Christian leftist. Probably my most conservative view is that I like football. That's probably the most conservative thing about me, and hockey.
No, we're not going to give sports to conservatives. Charlie Kirk abandoned that.
I know, but like in and of itself, football's probably, when you look at the morality of it, not the most progressive thing I could be into.
Yeah, mine would be probably, I think people should have the right to like own like a shotgun or something
Guns.
like that. And I think the media shouldn't be state owned, probably.
Well, I agree with that. I don't think is that considered a left-wing
Well, I
position?
mean, it's not really. I think a lot of leftists would probably agree with that. But in terms of like, I'm in favor of lots of types of nationalization, but maybe it's self-serving. But that's one where I'm like, I don't really see that working out.
I'd also say I dress pretty conservatively. Like I don't know. I grew up in I don't know. It's just
I don't think you dress conservatively in the sense of like whatever, like the actual like clothing amount of, it's like the floral patterns or whatever. That's the
I mean, I just like I wear jeans and a shirt and I'll wear a dress. That's kind of my thing. I don't really.
Again, I gotta question this as conservative.
I don't. So then I don't really know what. Damn, I don't know.
I guess maybe not conservative, because I guess grandmas can be pretty liberal. You just dress like a grandma.
That's fucking awful.
I love floral patterns. I've been looking for a floral pattern.
This is more hippie than anything.
That's true. That's
Hippies
true.
are grandmas now, though.
Yeah, that is also true. Yeah, you look like you're about to post some anti-vaxxer stuff on Facebook.
Wow. The majority reporters turned into MTV Yo Mama for this fun half.
Brandon, how long did it take us into the fun half for you to make an obscure television reference of a show that no one's watched?
I was just trying to distract away from the heat that's coming off of this roast session.
Oh no, there's no heat. There's no heat. I'm actually interested. What is your most conservative view, Brandon? I'll give mine. I'm really bad when it comes to like shopping places. Like obviously I use Amazon and shop at, I eat horribly. I'm always eating McDonald's and other terrible companies. It's just, I don't support them in terms of like, I'd fight for them. I often criticize them, obviously, but like just doomed to purchase from these places because they're what's there and they're fast. And I like them in terms of the taste or whatever, if we're talking food, or the quickness of ordering something or whatever. But yeah, that's my, that's where I'm doomed.
I don't like horses. Like really not that much at all. People feel very strongly about horses positively. I feel very negatively about horses.
You think that's a conservative value?
No, it's the opposite. Conservatives fucking love horses. They love only paintings of, horses or ships or
right.
Big faces.
I'm saying, yeah, I'm agreeing. I think it's a conservative. It's not conservative.
Yeah,
to hate horse.
If we're being, I think that we kind of got off the conservative aspect of things and just for fun facts. But honestly, if I had to be super honest about my most conservative, just generally speaking, viewpoint, I don't really like modern art. I don't get it really, and I do prefer like more classical, like impressionist and like older art pieces, romantic period stuff like that. I see like ink blots or like whatever on a canvas at MoMA, and I'm just like, does nothing for me.
But see, I agree with you. I think it does. People accuse you of being conservative, and I think there's a bit of truth to that. But the way I dress it up is to say that a lot of modern art is infiltrated by the CIA, and like the whole like write about what you know, and that whole like sort of like dehistoricize, individualize art thing was a product of imperialism. So I think it could rebound. I don't want to take away your one conservative thing though, Brandon, since it's tough to find them.
I'm always willing to cope.
Take that copium. I'm glad we spent that amount of time on that IM though.
It was fun. It was fun.
A fun trivia thing. Judy Giuliani says I wouldn't take fashion advice from Binder, Emma. Yeah.
Ooh.
Doug Ragler says, is Emma's Fonzie jacket considered conservative? I don't know about that. Ronald Spraygun says,
Is it like
NBA, NFL, NHL all have strong unions. This is something that needs to be talked about more to get right-wing sports fans on board with unions. That is true, but they always side with the owner and the institution and always say, oh, players asking for more money. So it doesn't, honestly, I think it might have the opposite effect.
Emma, is your leather jacket more of like a greaser or like punk rock style, or is it like a Harley Davidson like motorcycle jacket?
I don't know.
There's a difference. Does it got like the tassels and all that?
There's no tassels, no.
Okay, then it's probably not a conservative jacket. They love their Harley motorcycle tasseled jackets.
Yes. Judy Giuliani also asks, which Matt eats a worse diet?
It's got to be me. The hag probably got the worst diet on the show.
I mean, I can probably get there in spurts with Bender because I love fast food. One of my favorite things since the pandemic's been over is to listen to audiobooks while at fast food restaurants. It's just like it's a home to me. But I also have been eating a lot of salads, eating less meat for health purposes, and so I'm probably pulling a little bit ahead, maybe.
Matt's eating the taco salad at Taco Bell and calls that the healthy salad.
All right, maybe we should just do some clips, even though there's an IM about the Bachelorette that I wanna. Okay, what do I think about Katie's Bachelorette Final Four? I want Blake to win. Okay. Anyway, she has the most chemistry with him. Let's move on to Bra is upset. We can't say his name yet, but wait, did Sam give away another letter yesterday?
I don't think we can give away any more letters.
Without revealing it.
Oh wait, we still haven't.
Tomorrow's the day.
Tomorrow's got to be the day.
We still haven't revealed this?
No.
That's insane.
It is really insane. It is very silly the way Sam is.
People are gonna be
one letter at a time, and here are the first two letters, or one letter a day. Here are the first two letters. Like, all right.
Not knocking anyone, but people are going to be very disappointed. This is not going to live up to whatever expectations people have.
My favorite guess was it's Brianna Joy Gray.
I like Barack Obama. That's my favorite one.
All right. Let's talk about Jesse Waters, shall we? Jesse Waters has a solution for people who might experience detrimental effects of climate change, and it's kind of like if you guys saw that shirt that Paris Hilton wore one time, "Stop Being Poor." This is kind of the energy that Jesse's given off here, would you say, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that shirt. I also remember Ben Shapiro saying, just sell your house.
If it's underwater.
Yeah.
So lots of that. He kind of, he combined that satirical Paris Hilton shirt, I would say, with Ben Shapiro's legitimately stupid opinions. And he had a little segment on Fox News. Let's take a listen.
If you want to stop climate change, you don't fight climate change. If it's getting warmer, you adapt to it. Let's just say the sea levels rise a couple inches over the next century, Harold. Okay, it's a great civilization we have here. I think we can adapt to that. The Netherlands, 25% below sea level. They're like a powerhouse in Europe. They didn't just destroy their economy to fight the rise in the sea levels right there. They built reservoirs and kind of adjusted around the coastline, and they're fine. They didn't have...
So a point Sam always likes to bring up in counter to this Netherlands case study is Florida brought some engineers from Netherlands to sort of consult on how to do the same thing for Florida. And it turned out that actually it's limestone, I think, or a certain type of bedrock, which is porous. So you can't actually just like stop the water from coming in because it will come underneath. So you can't do that with Florida. Florida will be Atlantis. So all of these mitigation stuff, and also like these are literally biblical types of things we're talking about here. The ocean's rising inches. and just deal with that. I hope everyone feels confident that they can deal with biblical, whatever has happened in Germany, where hundreds of people died because a flood just leveled a town.
Well, let's be fair. Let's let him finish his point and see if maybe he addresses the actual extreme effects.
They built reservoirs and kind of adjusted around the coastline, and they're fine. They didn't have to break the bank to do it.
Dagan, you got an opinion on this?
Oh, yeah, I got a lot of opinions on it. America is awesome, and we aren't the problem because of the hydraulic fracturing boom, fracking, the use of natural gas, which, by the way, Joe Biden wants to end. You know, we need, even though we need electricity for the electric cars they want us to drive, I digress. Our emissions per capita are the lowest they've been since 1950.
Okay, that's my favorite part. I have an opinion. America is awesome. But the thing about this is, which is so fascinating too, is you see many of us are old enough to remember that for many years, Republicans denied that the climate was warming. For many, many years, that it was man-made, that it was warming at all. And now, of course, it's not a big deal. And Jesse Waters won't be affected by rising tides. He could always, sell his place and go live on a mountain, or he'll be affected in some way, but proportionately to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, especially because the way we talk about climate change is incredibly Americentric and Western-centric, and we entirely ignore what's happening in Asia and other areas that are experiencing lots of...
Somehow in Germany now, too.
Maybe then when it affects white people, we'll begin to pay attention. But his entire politics are colored by, it won't really affect me, so capitalism will just solve it all. We'll be able to build this and that, and then don't worry, these threats that are larger, at least in our minds, than this religious commitment I have to capitalism, they don't really matter because it'll just be solved by the free markets I've whacked off to my entire life, or at least pretends to. Because he's an actor. I'm sorry for putting that image in your mind, Matt.
Wait, no, I have something for this. That's called a money shot.
Emma, you said Jesse Waters could just sell his home and move to the mountains, but I have to ask you, who is he going to sell his house to? Emma? Aquaman?
The point is he could sell it as a loft, right? The point is he could sell it as or just abandon it because he's got money.
Right. I just watched the Disney movie Atlantis the other week, and let me tell you, their economy was booming. Their economy was booming, Matt. So it's all fun and games until Florida is the new highest earning state, superseding liberal bastion California, which is also on fire due to climate change, which is the other sort of part of this equation that kind of gets erased when we talk about one and not the other. Like the sea levels are rising only a few inches by, their metrics, which is not a bad thing, but also like half of America is on fire at any point in the year, leading to mass relocation of people, mass refugees, not to mention all the hurricanes we have. It seems as though all of these things happen in people's minds in little discrete like silos, like the hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico and Texas and all that stuff, and Florida going underwater, and then the mass droughts leading to mass fires throughout the plains in Northwest. And the whole picture is just kept away from people. It's not going to happen in the future when the sea levels rise. It's already happening. And like Emma said, we're moving from it's not happening to it's not happening, but it's, it is happening, but it's not man-made, to it is happening and it is man-made, but it's not so bad. And soon it'll just be, it is happening, it is man-made, it is really bad, but it's too late and there's nothing we can do about it. And, honestly, we might already be approaching that point. A lot of scientists think we are, but we're still having these kind of rudimentary conversations about what it's going to look like in 30 years if we don't start doing things then.
Well, there's already effects that are cemented. There's a lag time. There's like about a 10-year. I was just speaking to a reporter who covers climate change yesterday for the Peacock show. There's, a 10, 15-year lag time. And what we're emitting right now, we're going to feel exponentially based on what we're experiencing right now in 10 to 15 years. Yeah. And we can make the choice now to cut off that chain reaction and that exponential increase, or we cannot.
And all this stuff is not a referendum on the American people or American technical know-how, if you want to get nationalistic, or even, the world's technical know-how. I have full confidence that we could have addressed climate change. We knew it was going to be a problem even 100 years ago about the greenhouse effect, and technologically we could have moved towards solutions, but the reason we didn't is because capitalists couldn't allow that, because that would have ruined their system. Under capitalism, we cannot address this, and we're not going to, it looks like.
Well, yeah,
it is amazing how that America is just awesome from that other Fox News commentator. It's just a mockery to them too. It's not even like Jesse Waters is like just arguing just bullshit. Like, it's just also, they don't even bother to even because they can't, obviously. It's just easier for their audience to just reach out to what would make them feel good, and that is climate change is by criticizing America at all and bringing up climate change. You're saying America is not great and not the greatest place on earth. And so that's just it's just appealing to the lowest common denominator, because they have no argument, and that's all they're doing here. Like, even I'm not going to say credit, because it's not, but at least Waters tried to think of something to bring up to actually have the whole thing that they just fall to when they don't even have that is just oh, America's great, how dare you.
Right. I got a little bit more.
Wait, before we move on, I do have to correct you, Emma. What you said about that Paris Hilton shirt to open up the segment is misinformation. That shirt is fake.
Fact checking me.
That shirt was faked. That was photoshopped.
It was a psyop.
It's been around forever, and people have always talked about it. Yeah, her shirt did not say "Stop being poor." Someone photoshopped that, and that's the picture that always went around. The shirt she wore actually said something I think "Stop being desperate" or something like that. Not the same. Not the same.
I saw that documentary on her, and she's not had an easy life. So, but whatever. It's fine, relatively. All right, just.
I'm a big Simple Life fan, but I try to bring up old TV shows anymore since I get criticized for them. But no, I've been following Paris Hilton's career for a while, and I think she gets an unfair shot for the same reason that Britney Spears gets a lot of unfair shots. Not necessarily because our country hates the idea of a super wealthy person being incredibly dumb or wasteful, but because she did it while being in many people's opinions an airheaded bimbo. And that's the part that rubbed people the wrong way. Which if we were going after her for being the heiress of the Hilton fortune, that'd be one thing. But most people just hated her because she's Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie. But in hindsight, I think A Simple Life holds up a lot better than some of the other reality shows about those types of people do from around then.
I agree with you on how people usually knock people like Brittany and Paris, but I think comparing them is a little bit. Brittany actually did something and made money that way. Paris pretty much just was born into it. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different even between the two of them. No.
Well, no, I mean, yeah. Look, I would say moralizing about the individual is not the most important thing in terms of this.
Of course.
In that inheritance exists to that degree, absolutely, and I think that's basically the end of it. And how the individuals respond to it, I'd probably be fucked up by a giant inheritance too.
Yes. All right.
You guys could always give me any giant inheritances you ever receive if you're screwed up by them. I'll be happy to take your giant inheritance.
Then that's going to come out against the estate tax all of a sudden.
You can inherit her lasagna recipe if you look hard enough.
What'd you say, Brandon?
You can inherit Paris Hilton's lasagna recipe if you look hard enough.
Oh, so, yeah?
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro has something to say about Jeff Bezos.
Ben Shapiro always has something to say. It's amazing.
Unfortunately, he's got a lot to say. He's going to say that the rapid fire pace, and he's going to talk about how Jeff Bezos has done a lot of good in the world by building Amazon, by creating Amazon, which is contrary to every fact in the world. And he wants to praise this effort by Jeff Bezos to go into space. And he's here to tell us why it's actually a good thing for the American taxpayer. And is better than, say, if NASA were to be behind this effort to go into space. Here's what he had to say about this.
Jeff Bezos pays a lot of taxes. He spent a lot of money paying a lot of taxes. And
Hold
him
on.
using...
So right out of the gate.
I wasn't expecting that, honestly. That speed, right up front like that. It
I think
took me
I
by
solved.
surprise.
I think I solved the helium shortage, guys.
Holy shit, right out of the gate, he does not pay a lot of taxes, Jeff Bezos. He does not pay a lot of taxes. That's a verifiable fact, and it's a huge focus of a lot of tax policy and critics of our tax loopholes in this country. But I guess continue, Ben.
Jeff Bezos pays a lot of taxes. He spent a lot of money paying a lot of taxes. And him using his wealth in order to foster a brand new industry is actually really cool, because here is the alternative. We could, as a country, spend vastly more money than Jeff Bezos just spent in order to do the exact same kind of stuff by siphoning away your taxpayer dollars. How much money did it cost you to send Jeff Bezos to space? The answer is it cost you no money.
Okay,
you bought products.
Pause it. It did cost us money based on the wrong point that you completely butchered on purpose at the start of it, because he does not pay his fair share of taxes. Amazon does not pay his fair share of taxes. So that is our money redistributed to him, since his money should be taxed and be given to the government and given back to us. It does cost us money. It's actually probably more inefficient. And he talks about some industry that Bezos is going to create. There is no indication that beyond this 11-minute joyride in his completely Freudian rocket that he sent into the orbit for 11 minutes, that this is going to create some sort of industry that will have any effect. I will bet Ben Shapiro a lot of money, that there is no chance that this has some sort of trickle-down effect and creates a space travel enterprise funded by Bezos. This was an ego project so the dude could go into space, and he literally thanked Amazon workers who piss and have to defecate in weird places to make his quotas for allowing him to have this special experience. And Ben Shapiro is trying to say that that's a benefit to us. Oh, all right, keep going.
There's more. To do the exact same kind of stuff by siphoning away your taxpayer dollars. How much money did it cost you to send Jeff Bezos to space? The answer is it cost you no money.
Nope.
You bought products from Amazon. You subscribed to Amazon Prime. In return, you got value. Then he used the profit that he derived from that to do something cool. That's number one, none of your business. But number two, something that actually does benefit humanity. I've said this over and over.
One of the cool things he's done with deriving that profit is to fight unionization efforts. That's right. What he's doing with this profit.
Super cool.
But why do they all these space heads always say, I'm not just talking about Shapiro, I'm talking about the I fucking love science nerds. They always fall on this whole thing where it's he's benefiting humanity. What, by doing something NASA did 60 years ago? These guys haven't done anything breakthrough, anything whatsoever. They're just funding their own. If you want to talk about Bezos and Branson, who are obviously looking towards space tourism as a thing where they're just going to have fly people to the edge of space. Obviously, this won't be something you or I could afford. This will be billionaires creating something for millionaires. Or if you're going the Elon Musk route with SpaceX, which is just basically to get all these massive government contracts and sell your space goods to, again, the government, which they could just do themselves via NASA, but they're trying to help private enterprise by just doing it through SpaceX instead. It's ridiculous. These guys aren't doing any scientific breakthroughs, even if that's your one hope, the one thing you're holding on to take something good about the billionaire space wars. It's not even happening.
I just have no faith that the space tourism is even gonna amount to anything, though. I mean, even if Shapiro's facts over feelings guy is so blinded by capitalism, essentially, that he has complete faith that this is going to be some sort of industry that's actually going to take foot or take hold. I have no faith that it is. It's just an ego project for these guys.
I mean, it could certainly be a luxury thing, like buying yachts or going to certain places.
The overhead is so ridiculous. I don't even see this as a viable future.
This is all about like sort of who's going to be the future space oligarchs, about like who's setting satellites up and that sort of stuff. Like it's really just a giant PR stunt for that. So, and it's not really, it wasn't handled very well. Like, why would they think people get so excited by some like young kid throwing Skittle at Jeff Bezos up in the sky to illustrate zero gravity? I mean, OK Go had zero gravity in a music video in 2015. Like, no one gives a shit about this stuff.
It was really amazing to see how the media covered this and how it affected everyone else. Like, you hear about all the early, like, obviously we weren't around in the 60s during like the space race, but from what I've understood, it was something that the country rallied around, or, you know, people, a lot of people did. And it was something to have some sort of sense of like pride in, that, you know, we did this as a country. And even when we teamed up with Russia's space program, it's something that humanity did. But then this is just like, why? Like, people just don't care. Like, there's been no, like, you go down to talk to people, no one's paying attention to this, yet the media had wall-to-wall coverage yesterday. Someone from Media Matters pointed out that the coverage of Bezos's space travel the other day in the mainstream media amounted to the same amount of minutes or close to it that the same mainstream media organizations gave the climate crisis for the entirety of last year. The entire year. I mean, it was astounding to me to see all of a sudden the media cover this. And someone at CNN, some CNN host even said, like, tweeted something out like, oh, now that we've seen 2 people send their private enterprise to space, is this in a matter of a week? Is this something that the country can feel a sense of pride together in? And everyone who replied to him was like, no, what are you talking about?
Jed Psaki called it American exceptionalism.
Right. Like, no one cared about this. And what a time too for all this, right? Like, what a way to be completely out of touch in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of all this crisis about people not wanting to get vaccinated and all these looming crises. And this is what we're focusing on and talking up and even having done. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, you know, I think they represent 2 sides of the same coin, in the sense, you know, where the climate change crisis, a lot of aspects of the pandemic and our handling of it are just examples of the negative aspects of the late stage capitalism that we are now experiencing, you know, for lack of a better term. You know, everyone is dying and broke in the streets, basically, and more people are connecting the dots that they shouldn't be, just to keep like a handful of people incredibly wealthy and their sycophants on mainstream news, you know, continuing their unctuous behavior. And so, you know, the flip side of that incredibly heavy negative side of capitalism is this idea of like technological advancements. And these half-baked things like terrible electric cars that Tesla pushes out at a worse rate than many other companies we already have, or like this fake space race that we're having now between billionaires, are all they can really tote out to be examples of, here's what the free market is giving us. Shit that we had 40 years ago, but done worse and more expensive. And, you know, if you point that out to the people who are still invested heavily in the Bitcoin democracy that we have, it's, you know, it's just cope. I mean, honestly, it's like, what else can you say? I don't want to go to space. What is that going to do for me? What is an 11-minute ride in space for $500,000 going to do for anybody? Nothing, right? It's just a way to distract from all of the terrible things that have happened over the past year and a half as a result of those 2 people going to space, more or less.
Right. And,
you know, if not a direct result, but like the system that allows them to go to space.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, literally, like, Russia sent canines further into space than Jeff Bezos went. Like, I mean, dogs have literally been on the forefront compared to Bezos. And
it's a very literal,
that's your argument.
It's a very literal metaphor for how the private sector lowers the bar for themselves, I think, in order to pretend as though they're succeeding better than the public sector can and ever will be able to. And half of it is just like their ability to more vigorously engage in PR campaigns. It's like you see the same thing. Yeah, you see the same thing with charter schools. You know, they're able to advertise in a way that public schools are not. And so people think they're better. And in the aftermath of Katrina, we see charter schools, you know, bandying around to get the standard of education lowered so that they seem better in comparison. But, you know, the news doesn't really report this kind of tipping of the scales in favor of the private sector.
Right. You want to take some calls, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it. Also, I have to ask, there was a point where the Ben Shapiro clip either like paused for a second, or did he just have to take a huge gasp of breath because he couldn't keep up with how fast he was talking? Did you guys notice that?
I
No,
didn't
like
know.
I noticed for a second it stopped because Ben Shapiro was talking so fast that, like, it created an optical illusion where his mouth seemed closed. It's wild. People say I talk fast, but
559, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hello, this is Nick in Japan.
Hey, Nick in Japan. Does everybody hear Nick? I want to make sure the phones are working.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Nick in Japan, how's it going? How's everything in Japan? What would you like to talk about today? I'm going to assume I have a feeling about what you're going to want to talk about today, but maybe it's not. You tell me.
Well, it's probably not. I mean, the genocide Olympics are going on, unfortunately, but but that wasn't it.
Okay, no problem. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so a couple days ago, I think it was. I think Sam and Emma were talking about Facebook, and basically talking about how it should be smashed apart. And I agree with that, but I agree. I think I take a stronger position. That I'd like to go a little bit further with that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know how old everyone is there right now, but were any of you in web communities before Facebook?
Even like forums and are you talking like IRC or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
MySpace.
Yeah, all that.
I use 4chan.
Yeah, and some of those things are still there. 4chan is still there. The good and the bad. Actually, I'm not sure what the good is. I'm not really a 4chan.
Brandon is the good on 4chan. That's it. Everything he
4chan,
posts.
Okay.
4chan hasn't been good since I was in college. That's okay. Yeah. That's okay.
But what I think is okay. So now a lot of smaller communities, a lot of forums, chat rooms. There's still a lot hanging out there, but they've mostly been marginalized, pushed to the fringes. Like forums have been made mostly obsolete by, say, Reddit and Facebook groups and like that stuff like that. And I feel like the existence of a general purpose, a general audience, social media platform is a monopoly in itself. I think maybe web communities should be focused and not just broken up, remove Instagram and Facebook and Messenger, those different things. But I think that maybe go back to the small web forums, back to the MSN groups, things like that, things that target smaller groups. And I don't know. I
see what you're saying. I agree that the problem with Facebook is that I don't think the idea of a global social network was a good idea. I think the idea that you can have people from all different world, all around the world of different, not even just the differences in that. I mean, that's fine. I'm talking about when you have different cultures, beliefs, just like all these different little things that make every these individual, and they're all on the same website, and you expect them to all live in harmony, and for shit not to spread around. That's terrible. I mean, obviously, it's proof that we've seen the proof that it's a recipe for disaster. And I do think, the web was better when it was people going to forums based on their interests and on their hobbies or whatever they were into. But my thing is, I don't know how you would enforce that in terms of like a rule. Like, you could break up Facebook because they own so many different properties, so many different platforms. But I don't know like how you would put a cap on how big a platform could grow, and then like at a point they would just have to shut off signups to the website. Like, I don't understand. I don't know how, like, while I agree that it would be better that way in terms of like how the internet works, I just don't see how you would make that happen. Like, even if you didn't set out to make a global social network, by default, I do think some would rise to the top based on how popular they are or whatever features they have that make them better. Obviously, you want to make sure they don't eat up the competition. That's where we would break them up and stop that. But I don't see how you would put a cap on how many users they could have or anything like that. That's when I'm struggling. I don't see how we would make that happen.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a matter of like how many users, just more of what the focus of the community would be. And yeah, like I don't really have an answer there. I just think it's an idea worth floating.
Right. Well, Facebook's whole thing is like they're not like when you would join a message board or whatever back in the day, you'd join like, oh, I'm looking for an arts and crafts forum. Oh, this is arts and crafts dot whatever. Or I'm looking for a pro wrestling forum or a forum full of other liberals like that. And that's what those sites were for. Facebook doesn't market itself as any specific platform for any specific anything. It's just
people you know.
And I think that's the problem.
Like, that's it. Like I don't. Then there's that too. I don't see how we would enforce that a platform would have to focus on a specific topic or I think that, yeah, I see what you're saying, and I would be fine with it naturally happening that way. I just don't think that could be enforced.
You mind if I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please do.
No, I mean, I agree partially with what the caller is saying, Nick, right? Not to be rude. But, I think ultimately Facebook gets away with a lot of their own like proactive decisions by pretending as though, regardless of its, I guess, like the plurality of people who use it, that it's just a neutral platform that people are choosing to use in a way that is not intended by the overarching business practices that's somehow deviant from the business model of Facebook by creating like anti-vaxxer groups or fringe conspiracy groups or any number of things. When in reality, Facebook, and we know through ad revenue or through like exposés about the way they sell ads, that Facebook has no problem with monetizing and commercializing the fact that these fringe communities exist on their platform. And for the most part, they're just choosing as a company to allow this stuff to go on because it's not deviant from their business model. In my opinion, it's a core part of it, just like, selling your data is a core part of it. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said about general communities trending towards maybe some of the worst excesses of the internet if they're allowed to. But there's also something to be said by a lot of these social media companies actively stoking these types of silos of conspiratorial thinking because, it makes the money, it makes money for them, makes money for advertisers. Theoretically, it makes money for, Ben Shapiro advertising on Facebook. And that's just the core business strategy at this point. There's money to be made from reactionary communities growing.
Right.
I agree with that. I can propose one idea and
really quick because we got to jump.
Okay. Perhaps it could be broken down into sites that are compatible with each other, that communicate with each other, but administrate different regions. So like these regions could communicate, it would be a standard platform, but the company would be forced to break up itself into regional variants, regional management, regional ownership.
That could be interesting. I don't have the positives and the negatives on this right now, but that's definitely something worth looking into. Yeah, definitely.
Because I think these ideas are worth considering.
What were you saying, Matt?
Anyway, I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, caller. But Matt, I want to hear what you were saying.
It'd just be difficult if you want to be friends with somebody outside your region.
Right.
I think a little bit.
Right.
But I also think I just want to make a quick point on Facebook. Like I saw this ad where it was like it's called like the Deaf Hoops ad, and it's these deaf guys using Facebook to connect and play basketball together, and like that is obviously great. But you think about the other type of people who are connecting through Facebook, right? Like to join a militia or whatever, right? Like talk about racism. Like I think whenever I see these commercials, I think it's pretty insidious. The way that they're like trying to act like we're a fostering community, but like it's actually not good.
Yeah.
The type of community they're fostering.
I mean, I think that goes back to, Facebook's central sort of premise or justification for existing, that like sans them, you would not be able to communicate across long distances with people who went to your high school after college, or, basically stuff like that. You're going to forget the past. You're going to forget all these memories. You have to have a digital scrapbook. You have to remember, your middle school boyfriend's fucking birthday 20 years in the future. Otherwise, you know, somehow you're a less developed, less connected person. But that was a solution to a problem that didn't really exist. Like the caller said, we had BBS boards, we had email, we had, you know, phone calls, we had texting, we had all those things that people, if you really wanted to communicate with them, you could definitely do it. And, you know, now Facebook continues along this line of trying to integrate itself more and more into not only like the basic communication infrastructure of Americans' lives, but just like internationally. Like Facebook wants to be the sole messenger for countries or whatever, basically through their advertising and propaganda. And that just basically, you know, where I agree with the basic premise of the caller's, you know, call essentially, is that like it needs to be broke up, because like it just becomes a tool for the information and security state to use, when like, you know, everyone in the world is using one information social media network, and it's centralized in America, and it has and you know, the American government has backdoors built into it. It's just not a very secure thing to be doing.
Right. And on what your point too about, you know, Facebook being like, you know, promoting itself as this major communicator and way to remember all these people and have these memories stored. It's also really important to remember, because that's obviously what they push, that wasn't even why Mark Zuckerberg founded it to begin with. There was no idea of a greater good, creating a good communication platform where connecting people all around the world, family, friends you haven't seen in a while. No, the point was to create a website that rated college women from the Ivy League schools or some shit like that. Like,
yeah, it was like a hot or not type thing for what, Harvard or Stanford or whatever school he like went to. I didn't watch the Social Network.
Yeah.
Right. Like the idea that he even looked at people like me and Brandon on equal footing as like Emma is not even that. It wasn't like he wanted to create a service for Emma to use. He wanted to rate her.
Right. All right. Well, we have. I'm super tempted to do this Emmanuel Acho thing. Does anyone have any issue with that?
No, go for it. You have to give the context for the Bachelor stuff, though.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, this guy. This is not really a politics story, but it's, I think, broader, because he's indicative. This guy Emmanuel Acho is kind of indicative of this new type of media personality. He is pro-capitalist, but co-opts the rhetoric of racial progress to make points that are, I think, problematic at the very least, upholding of corrupt institutions at most, or in reality. Go on, Matt.
Oh, well, I mean, just his background, like he is a former Texas Longhorn football player that went to the pros and didn't do a whole lot there, got 33 tackles in over like 4 years. And now he came to my radar. He had one of the most inane luxury car commercials, I think, in the history of the genre.
Yeah, let's watch that, because he's...
But I just want to finish his bio quickly. Like, he replaced Jason Whitlock on a sports talk show, and Jason Whitlock's sort of a black conservative. And I don't know if that show was trying to go in a different direction or not. But I have this. Acho's came up recently in sort of like the sports punditry, saying things you have to apologize for later. So he said, like, when Sha'Carri Richardson was banned from the Olympics, he said, like, you know, we should be banning people for running in a straight line, but, you know, if javelin throwers started smoking marijuana, then we might have a problem. So just like a completely dumb thing.
Yeah.
Frankly, like, I'm cynical enough to think that he doesn't really even care about what he's saying, that he knows something like that will get sort of attention. But anyway, he also said of Sha'Carri Richards, suspending athletes for smoking weed in 2021 is dumb. Smoking weed, knowing you will be drug tested is dumber, or is also dumb. So I'm not sure which is dumber. So this is the kind of mode he's trafficking in.
Right, and he was, just to point out The Bachelor, he replaced Chris Harrison, who was fired for, you know, racial insensitivity, and this was meant to signal some sort of progressive direction by ABC. And if you have any familiarity with these major networks, ABC is definitely, I would say, the most conservative. They also own ESPN. He's on ESPN. Now all of a sudden this guy's doing Lexus commercials. Let's watch that. And then he also had some insane commentary about Giannis Antetokounmpo, which you could definitely construe as xenophobic.
Because everything great is birthed through discomfort. It's time to get uncomfortable. Let's get uncomfortable. That's when we find empathy. Once we get past our differences, that's when we find empathy, because real empathy, it knows no age, no color, no gender. Real empathy, it says, hey, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I understand you. I may not be you, but I love you. That's what truly matters.
So I think that gives a sense.
So the thing he's talking about discomfort up front, his like brand is uncomfortable conversations with a black man. I think maybe it's a slightly different title, but I don't understand like the things that I've seen him say, and we'll play the Giannis thing too, where he thinks it's too complicated for Giannis to be the face of the NBA because of his background. Like I don't understand why. I think maybe like the reason these conversations are uncomfortable is because he's not actually expert in this sort of subject matter, and actually it's just mainly like Lexus is comfortable paying him to like speak some of the vague sort of surfaces of these concepts.
All right, just play the Giannis thing. I can't believe we're doing this, but I this guy's such a clown, and he's gonna be more visible.
Not be the face of the NBA, because the face of the NBA must be relatable. LeBron James. We know LeBron James' mama, know his mama name. We know his wife, know the kids' names. We know Bronny, we know Bryce, we know Zuri. We know the characters' names from the Space Jam. We know all them cats. Kobe, the late, great Kobe Bryant. Respect. We knew Kobe Bryant. We knew his upbringing. We knew why he knew so many different languages. We played at Lower Merion High School. We knew his high school jersey number. We knew he repped the 3-3. Knew he was...
I don't know any of that at all.
Yeah.
What is he talking about? How can you relate to LeBron James? He's like 6'7" or 9. What?
How can you relate to LeBron James, the child prodigy that came right into the NBA and has been the freakiest athlete in the world for years? How can you relate to Kobe Bryant, who lived internationally and knows? Why does that make him more relatable than Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Yeah, Kobe grew up in Italy with a professional athlete father. LeBron was on Slam magazine when he was like 16.
Yeah, what are you talking about? It's because Giannis grew up in Greece and was from Nigeria? Is that what that is? Because that's like a problematic statement.
You guys don't know this about me, but I'm actually a professional basketball player in Toontown, so I do relate with LeBron James. Me and him are on that same level.
Yeah, and as for me and Kobe Bryant, my dad, when he was on the professional bocce ball tour circuit, it was real big for me to see Kobe.
Yeah.
I also thought he was referring to the Looney Tunes when he said, all those cats in Space Jam too. I was like, well, yeah, of course I know who Bugs Bunny is. What does that have to do with anything? I don't relate to him either.
I mean, I probably could relate to Bugs Bunny.
I mean, this is the second kind of bad thing that's come out of ESPN about foreign players.
Well, it's the exact same. Well, that's the thing. Reason I'm cynical about this is Stephen A. Smith just had a news cycle where he said the same thing about Shohei Ohtani, that he can't speak English, so he can't be the face of the league, and then he apologized for it. Not even like a week later, literally saying the exact same thing about Giannis, who is one of the most charismatic, also can speak English,
and great guy, and also as if we don't know his background.
Well,
the NBA's been churning how poor he was and trying to make it this rags to riches thing, which is great, but
we're gonna hear a lot more about that too, because I think Disney Plus has a documentary or something coming out on it, and it's actually going to. I think this couldn't be more wrong. I think as far as a league that wants to have an international presence, I think Giannis is going to be amazing for that, because I think he is just like I said, extremely he seems fun to be around, and his story is, I think, incredibly relatable to all sorts of people who didn't go to the NBA finals. I think it's people who have refugee stories or citizenship stories. That is relatable for people in this world. And that
my dad has become a casual NBA fan. He was bigger when he was younger, and he just is I love Giannis. That's who he was rooting for the whole time. I mean, anyway, it's just what a weird guy. But this is a new kind of influencer type.
Yeah, I think it's uncomfortable that
it's a uncomfortable conversation, you might say.
Exactly, but this is the guy we want modeling anti-racism to the Bachelor audience.
That's right. What I think. To Emma's point, why are we doing this? I think we've had a lot of calls in the past few months of people calling in about no, I'm 18 and black, and a lot of people around me are watching Candace Owens and things like that, and I think it's important that we kind of define, or at least try to understand the contours of these conversations.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm done.
No, I was going to say, I think that makes a lot of sense because ultimately, I think, when you operate in generally, just American mainstream political spaces, like you get told a narrative about like what it means to essentially be capable of being racist or be capable of perpetuating any form of American bigotry. And a lot of those narratives we hear are meant to by nature exclude people who are more aligned with the Democratic Party's ideology, more aligned with what's going on, and make it easier for the Democrats and other left-leaning nonprofits to paint a liberal coding over what they're doing through various identity signifiers. And so like the actual full extent to which Americans are indoctrinated with neoconservative and neoliberal imperialist, et cetera, hegemonic ideas is undercut by people consistently pointing to like, well, how can a Black person be racist? How can a woman be sexist? Like these kind of very rudimentary questions that should be easily answered are like meant to trip up what is essentially a shell game for the Democratic Party, for Republican Party to frame these things as essential qualities of populations as opposed to a hegemonic reality that we should all be combating. And every time we have a Black soldier, it just shuts down our entire political media discourse because they just don't understand how to handle it. And it's just like that speaks to me, a lowering of the standards because it's not too complicated to understand that not only are people who are indoctrinated into American ideology, broadly speaking, through school and media, might feel some way about the military, might feel some way about Muslims. But also that people who seek to succeed within America are taught to act out these certain behaviors that make it, even if they don't personally believe it, strongly enough to be considered a bigot, truly, they are willing to play that role because it gets them on TV. They know what needs to be said. They know how to say it, and they know how to like skate that line so that they don't get kicked off for being racist because they know what the pitfalls that have been laid out are that they need to dodge that claim because they've been very carefully laid out so that, some of our more liberal leaning figures can dodge them quite easily by having Black friends, by being Black, by having worked at, a nonprofit, just these little, obviously inconsequential to ideology or to sort of viewpoint signifiers of liberalness, I guess.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it seems like kind of like a silly story, but I just think, I don't know. There was more.
No, I thought it was. Excuse me if you guys mentioned this, but I was sort of a little bit, sports story. I had trouble following.
No.
But what was the like? I don't understand what the reasoning for him saying that was. Like, just because I don't like. Why was he so?
Also, it was FS1.
You can explain it. We haven't even gotten to the part yet.
Sorry. Yeah, this is FS1, I think. Not
yeah, this is just sports punditry trying to say inflammable things to get attention.
All right, yeah.
So there was no. Go ahead. Let's watch the clip.
All of that, but Giannis. We know Giannis's mama name. I do.
What's her name?
Veronica.
Veronica?
Yes. No, that's her.
No.
Name.
See, that's the problem.
Oh, God,
you can't relate to something if you keep
I try to help you, stop.
I hate when people say, like, where you from? And you say, it's somewhere small.
No.
I was like, food.
No.
Tell me
So here is part of the problem,
Veronica.
Which is why Giannis can't be the face. What? Because Giannis goes to what I go to. People always ask me. I got asked this at a wedding, I think 2 weeks ago. Hey, Acho, where you from? I said, Dallas, Texas. He was Nigerian. He said, no, where are you from? I said, Isukoto, Abia State. He was like, a hand. I was like, see, I didn't know what you meant. There's so many hoops and obstacles that we have to jump through in order to make Giannis the face. Okay. And I just think, if we're being honest, we're too lazy to jump through him.
What?
I like that argument that people make. Everyone, well, first, I think it's important to Emmett Broad's story because it is indicative of this new face of how they're laundering in, socially reactionary politics into not just conservative media but conservative adjacent and liberal media just by having like a Black person or a woman say it is supposed to make it somehow more okay to say it. And it's, I'm having the difficult conversations. Well, it's like, no, you're having the wrong conversations, but you're having them while Black. And so it seems like it's a little bit more taboo and nuanced, but there have always been sellouts, I suppose. The second part of that too is just like cope. You didn't make it, and so Giannis can't either. No, I recognize that. I recognize jealousy, but it is what it is.
Right.
It's just to bring up a personal anecdote in that context made no sense.
You guys want to take another call?
Yes.
Let's go.
Went to a wedding. Okay. Anyway, keep going.
Let's go to this call. 575. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Jeff in New Mexico.
Hi, Jeff in New Mexico. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, first I just wanted to say to just comment on the breaking up of things like Facebook. I just wanted to comment and say really the big thing that needs to be broken off is the massive data repositories that they own, and that's the real part that needs to be broken out of these massive tech companies, the actual ownership of our so-called data.
Oh, that's a great point. Absolutely. I think there's many real problems, but I absolutely agree with their ownership over the data, just the massive amount of data they hoard and use. You saw just if you were paying attention, if you're a techie and paying attention to the fight between Apple and Facebook over this, where Apple just basically made it harder for Facebook to take your data for its advertisers. If you're an iPhone user or an iPad user, Apple is using privacy as a feature for using their phones. And basically you can make it so the Facebook app can't collect your data if you're using an Apple device. And Facebook was very angry about this.
Well, yes, the only problem is that now it's just that Apple owns your data at that point, but who's worried about that anyway? But I'm not sure anyway what Apple is doing with how they're constructing their data repositories, but yes, that is now a sales pitch for most of these companies. But I did want to bring up this whole thing with the Bitcoin and blockchain. I just find it absolutely hilarious that these companies that are creating sort of I guess they're calling them currencies, but who knows what they really are. They're just massive card collecting devices. But I find it interesting that the best thing that we can figure out how to do in our current capitalist infrastructure is what we can do with a massive algorithm for a massive ledger and accounting algorithm is we can make a bunch of fake trading cards, which I kind of find absolutely interesting when in actuality we could have been using a ledger technology in the case of something like postal banking, where we could have been using this technology to, for example, pass out large amounts of cash to individuals and actually have a ledger of it during the COVID crisis, which would have been an interesting kind of take on what we could have done with that kind of ledger or that kind of technology. And yeah, that's just my kind of comment on that. But anyway,
no, it's a great point. Really appreciate the call. I agree with you.
But anyway, y'all enjoy the rest of your day, and I love the show.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day. You guys want to take? I think we have time for one more quick call.
Sure.
Let's go to 561. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I think you guys actually talked to me before. This is Blue Orange 22.
Hey, what would you like to talk about?
Sam, I want to
Well, what was that?
What's up, Emma?
What's
I
up?
said, hey, what's up? And Emma, I think I talked to. You guys, I don't think that I've met. God, I could talk a lot about what you guys were saying. First of all, my favorite coffee is black coffee, very strong, but I make it the night before and I put it in the fridge so it's cold the next morning. Some people think that's weird. I swear by it. I absolutely swear by Trader Joe's black coffee in the silver and red can. Put it in the fridge overnight. Delicious. You guys were talking about soda and pop and Coke. I think this whole pop nonsense is absolute BS. The other thing I can't stand they do in the Midwest is they call water fountains a bubbler.
Thank you.
What the hell is a bubbler?
Thank you, caller.
I've never heard of
it. I know, it's the most nonsense thing. And then as for Coke in the South, this kind of ties into football. I know Emma likes football. I went to the 2011 Iron Bowl in Auburn, and we went to a few restaurants with a buddy of mine, and I had no problem ordering Coke in a restaurant and getting Coca-Cola. So I'm not sure if that's still a thing or not, but that's that. I will disagree with you and a lot of people on the Jeff Bezos going to space thing and Richard Branson. I'm not going to talk about his taxes because I honestly don't know about this, but I think that overall doing that is a good thing for science technology as a whole. It's kind of moving humanity forward. And NASA had a lot of the same criticism back in the 60s, people saying, oh, going to the moon is a waste of money, yada, yada, yada. But what you're doing is you're investing in the future. And 50 years later, the gains that we made in physics and technology have been vastly beneficial. So it's expensive now.
Sorry to interrupt, but the important thing is who owns those gains.
I mean, I agree that there's a problem financially when it comes to corporations and taxes. I'm talking about the science aspect of it, though.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
We just had this whole conversation though about the people who, and if you didn't hear it, that's fine. But the whole idea of the science aspect of it, and it's just a PR move. Like there is no science aspect of it. And any breakthrough that does happen, who knows how many years down the line, that science aspect is going to be owned by whatever corporation that is certainly going to receive subsidies and government contracts, meaning we could have just been doing this on our own for the greater good. Yeah. Anything they find out will be owned by them, and they'll sell it for massive profits. And people who can't afford to take part in this scientific breakthrough, well, tough luck on them. I guess they're stuck not taking part in whatever this scientific breakthrough is.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the fundamental research angle of like why you defend NASA, but I reject that it's applicable here because any big advancements are going to be privately owned by these vampires.
I guess we'll know in 20 years. I still think.
I mean, but we gotta
jump. We gotta jump.
We got it. We're running out of time. All right, we have to jump. But I will say.
Okay, listen, tell.
All right. Well, I dropped them. I will say this though. I mean, we don't need to wait 20 years. We know what happens when companies own scientific breakthroughs. Look why people in this country can't afford insulin or other medications. There was we don't need space to have scientific breakthroughs. We've seen what happens when scientific breakthroughs happen, especially when it comes to breakthroughs that affect people's health. And when a company claims ownership of it, what happens? People die because they can't afford to pay for insulin. Why is that? Because a company owns that scientific breakthrough.
And I mean, actually, that hits on some of the why this is so offensive, this moment in history, that we had this moment of public research and now it's been just privatized by these freaks to go up and throw Skittles around.
Right.
All
right, let's read some IMs and get out of here. My eyes twitching, which was probably from that call.
No offense, Scott.
Sorry. Chowder with Crowder says, didn't realize Bezos and Musk were going to be giving away their taxpayer-funded scientific discoveries for free. I didn't realize that either. DJ Cold Case says the best way to break up Facebook is to go back in time and help Zuckerberg get laid. Not a bad idea. I would love to go back in time and do some other things other than that, but maybe that's a worthy endeavor. Aaron is not cool says also the finals made it abundantly clear that Giannis's history. I don't understand why they have to do this. Also, this is on Fox Sports. Yeah, I think I clarified that.
Oh, did you guys see one of the IMers, Left Leckening? Oh, I like that. Left Leckening. Is Bitcoin going to achieve world peace? I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a cryptocurrency conversation live stream yesterday between Jack Dorsey of Twitter, Elon Musk, and a few other people. And Dorsey of Twitter said, my hope is that Bitcoin, talking about Bitcoin, creates world peace, which is these guys.
All those guys have connections to the far right, so that's also another interesting data point to just suggest what they might imagine world peace to be.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't need Bitcoin to even create world peace if that's what his ultimate goal is. Taking what you mentioned, Matt, like he owns a platform where he can just make that platform closer to the world he wants to see, and he doesn't even do that.
Or maybe he is doing it.
There you go. Right.
Oh, evil music. We need the soundboard. Between the 101 and the 5 says, I think Van Gog's framing of our unfinished revolution points out really directly what our job should be as leftists and socialists to keep pushing like Debs and Bernie. So crucial right now. Totally agree. Mickey7 says, Ron DeSantis is the most recent proof that you can graduate from Ivy League schools and still be an idiot. That's accurate.
I mean, I would hope that doesn't need more explanation.
It doesn't need more explanation. I like the lionizing of these institutions. You know what's just a small tangent. When somebody says, oh, this guy's so smart, or this woman's so smart, I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care. Dick Cheney was smart. Being smart is not a virtue. That's
also, the Ivy League should be raised and made into state schools.
Hell yeah. Culturally Catholic says, very happy with what Milwaukee Tuesday, very happy with what happened in Milwaukee Tuesday night. Unbelievable that a kid born in Athens from Nigerian parents decides to stay in Wisconsin and win a national championship. A perfect American success story, such a blessing out of terrible times. Every city needs a story and a win like ours right now. Bucks and 6 is Culturally Catholic. I didn't realize how hard I was rooting for the Bucks until like Game 4 and Game 5 started rolling around, and then I was, out of my chair. Really, really great for them.
Yeah, shout out to the people in Milwaukee too. I'm very happy for you.
Chowder with Carter says, glad your eye is better, Emma. Hopefully now you can clearly see that Tom Brady is the greatest of all time. Yawn. I'll never. Right. This is a losing battle for me. V says, damn Binder. Now Demi Jor fans can clip this and say, see, they comment on the way the only woman dresses.
Oh boy. Oh my God. I want to make this clear as day.
Please
clear
don't.
as day. Emma, I was joking. I
don't
am
care.
a big fan of you, Emma. I love how you dress. Nothing even close to Jimmy Dore, what Jimmy Dore said. It had nothing to do with anything even remotely the same.
You know what though? Like, I feel sometimes, I love shit talk, so I really appreciate it.
Well, here's some. Jimmy Dore's channel is stalled. It used to be called TYT Comedy, and you can go look at all that stuff on Social Blade and wonder why he's maybe acting out a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you guys talk about I'm going to talk about it tonight on my show because I have some footage from that it hasn't been released unless you're subscribed to him, which thankfully someone who is got to me. But did you hear about this AOC rumor that spread online yesterday about what was that?
That she's like some restaurateur.
Yes, that she co-owned the restaurant she bartended at. Her whole story was a lie and a sham, and all these dumb lefties were sharing this rumor everywhere and spreading this conspiracy. It came from Dore's show. That's where it came from. It should be no surprise, but this came from his show. He had Paula Jean Swearingen, who was a West Virginia progressive candidate who tried to take down what's his face? I'm having a mental block now. Manchin.
In person, and I will say I'm not surprised by this turn.
Yeah, and she basically said this on the show that she co-owned the restaurant, and Jimmy Dore did just let her say it. Nothing, just moved on. No surprise again. But then this spread all over, and then you actually had this reaching the point where people actually had to go out of their way, including myself and Ryan Grimm and Dave Weigel, to debunk this because it was getting out of hand. The idea that AOC, who is some sort of champagne socialist, who's really a prominent NYC Manhattan restaurateur, it's just bizarre, just crazy.
Well, it's the guy who wanted a Lava Jato T-shirt is really busy telling us how all to be on guard against CIA meddling in other countries. So. Oh
yeah, and she's the champagne socialist, as he rakes in cash and streams from his $1.5 million.
Had cop parents too. Am I wrong about that?
LA home. Oh yeah, he did have cop parents.
The dad, maybe, I don't know.
Well, you're not your parents, right? My parents are lawyers, so.
I also don't have that much larger of a mortgage than my parents did, or any mortgage at all. But anyway,
I don't think any of us have mortgages. We all have that in common.
I have a student loan. It's like a mortgage, but you don't get anything for it.
But you get to get lectured to by people like Joe Biden about why you deserve it.
You have a podcast.
I do, but I kind of stole that, so.
Chowder with Crowder. Geez, Chowder with Crowder are active today. Matt is correct about Florida being a limestone peninsula, and that limestone is permeable to water, but in addition to that, limestone is incredibly soluble in acid. Florida isn't just going to be deluged, great word, it's going to be in the sea entirely, not a great outcome, as the ocean acidifies to higher atmospheric CO2. You can see this already with the frequent sinkhole formation across the state. Expect more surprise building collapses. That's incredibly ominous, and I appreciate the information. We're just going to do a few more. Oliver Wendell Holmsley says, how's the hangover from yesterday? I watched the finals alone. I had one glass of red wine. I wish it was more. I wish I had a party, but and I wish I watched with someone else. That's why, if you see me tweeting about the sports thing, I'm probably watching it by myself and just want to share with people.
Oh my God. Did you guys see who Tucker Carlson had on his special Fox Nation show?
I saw you at Charles Murray a month or so ago.
Really?
No, today or late yesterday or whatever.
Who?
Jimmy Dore.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, we'll be covering that tomorrow, I'm sure.
You had Charles Murray on?
Tucker?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
of course.
No, I thought you meant
Tucker did, not
Jimmy. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, that wouldn't be surprising either, honestly.
You hate the establishment, don't you? You think the establishment lied us about the bell curve. Go on.
That was a good door prep. Was that you, Lek?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was Lek or Finn.
All right, just a few more. Acho, or from Rob from Dedham, says Acho saw the attention that Stephen A. got for the Otani comments and the lack of any real blowback from it, and made the calculus that no press is bad press. What he said didn't need to make sense; it needed to make a headline, and it did.
I agree.
That's exactly it. And sports punditry on cable news is the lowest of the low. FS1 is certainly, or Fox Sports is just, I mean, there's a reason
The thing is, the right gets a lot of their guys from sports talk radio. We were talking about this before the show. Rush was a sports talk radio, and now Clay Travis is taking over Rush's spot. He's the next in line. He was always in sports.
Right. All right, just a few more. Denver Dave says, I've been told that I'm prettier when I frown. Lafayette Left Pard says, Loft College represent. Sure, it's not a great institution, but I did go there. And the Shane from Canada says, this is the final IM of the day. It's also important to note that Miami's main source of water is a few hundred feet from a Superfund site. Sounds very Florida to me. All right, guys. Thanks so much for the great day. Matt, Brandon, Brendan, Matt, Brendan.
Always a pleasure. I just want to drop one more time. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. Subscribe now if you're watching on YouTube. And join me tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern time for a live stream.
And the last IM of the day actually is Reagan was a sports radio guy. I didn't know that. And anyway, I thought that was fascinating. And then Brandon, Discourse, anything to plug?
Yeah, we should have a new episode out this weekend or by latest Monday on the SoundCloud. So check it out if you're into that sort of thing.
Left Reckoning?
There'll be Literary Hangover this weekend. It'll probably be on William Byrd, not Daniel Boone, as I promised. But I need to set the table for Daniel Boone. So William Byrd, 1711, probably this weekend.
Oh, can you, when we... Give me a preview of that Daniel Boone one when we hang up. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
It might take that guy to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. get somewhere the choice is made. For the option where you don't get paid. For the road